This is my old 1986 Honda XL600R. If you're thinking of buying one of these things and you don't know what it is, then you know, hopefully this is a good video for you. It's an old bike. It's getting a little long in the tooth for sure. You know, it's actually an antique, really. I mean, 1986. It's up 40 years old almost. So I mean, you're going on half a century. Man, these things they don't build them like this anymore. These were really good bikes. The Japanese, they were just really trying to break into that market, and they weren't building junk back in the day. They're building some good stuff, but it is getting old. But with that said, it is a basic bike. So I mean, a lot of things are available, like the swing arm bearings and the headstock bearings and the consumable stuff. You know, the tires and the brake pads, and you know, you still get oil filters and plugs, and you know, it's getting harder to find anybody to work on this stuff for you. But you know, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and buy a manual, this is a pretty cool bike. It's got the original pipe on, so it's really quiet, and it always starts up. The battery's a little dead, so what you do is you turn the fuel on, you put it out, and then there's a decompression, and you swing it through a couple times until it gets to TDC, and then you pull the decompression and just kick it down a little bit, let go of the decompression, and then full choke, and it should start. Man, it's such a reliable old bike. That's why I like these old bikes. I built a set of ice racing tires for it. Not ice racing. That's not quite true. These are for trail riding. And I got a spare set of rims from somewhere back in the day. And what I used on the back wheel is I used bolts and nylock nuts. And I've had this wheel for about 20 years now. And then once in a while in the winter I'll put them on. And it's nice to have a spare set of rims. And on the front I just put those sheet metal screws, and I put them right in the tube. So I brought brand new tires. I bought brand new tires and drilled holes in the rear where the bolts went through, nylock nuts, and then inside is a street tire that I cut up, and I cut the bead off the street tires, stuffed it in there, then I put a heavy duty tube in, and then I put rim locks on as well. And that thing has been on there for about 20 years, and it is an absolute nightmare to get on and off for sure, but turned out good. And the bolts are pretty robust. You can see the wear on them. I think they are 7/16 bolts, 3/8 shaft on them, and then 7/16 head, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. But anyways, pretty cool. I'm going to put them on the old bike today and then go for a little rip. It's a radial 4-valve configuration, which made it kind of unique. These motors, the 400 XR, shared the same cylinder head configuration, where the valves are all 45 degrees on angles perpendicular to each other, if that makes sense. So they're all, you know, they're not only like this, but they're canted off to the side. So hence the acronym on the side. It says RFVC, which is radial 4-valve configuration. I believe that's what it stands for. I could be wrong, but anyways, I digress. Had this bike for about 20 odd years. It was bought, someone loved it obviously from a dealership, and then it was ridden, stolen, abandoned, trashed, spray painted, left out in the woods, recovered a friend bought it, and then I bought it off him. So I was going to part it out back in the day, and before I part it out and put it on eBay, you know, you want to make sure it runs good, and so etc. etc. So I got it running, and it ran so good. Somebody had been driving it around after they stole it without an air filter in it, which is horrendous. But I got this thing running, and it ran so good. Man, did it run good. It had still good compression, like really good compression. And I just didn't have the heart to part it out. So I built it for myself. Although it's an Enduro, the XL is signifies the Enduro flavor of these 600s. And then the XR was fully off-road. They had a few other variations on a theme over in Europe. They had an XLV, I think. They had Transalp. They had a Dominator. They had they never sold those in Canada. But I think they had an Africa Twin too, maybe the XLV600R. Anyways, he had some really cool variations on the theme. But this one's pretty cool. It had the red, white, and blue original paint scheme on it. I stripped all the paint off the tank. It was kind of ratty. I spray painted it, polished it, spray painted it. I put on lower gearing, taller sprockets on the rear. I cut the swing arm, brought it back an inch so that it's better for hill climbing. I don't do like real crazy hill climb, but sometimes you get on a hill and the front end's floating around. I guess that's crazy. I don't know. It helps a little bit. It's got the original gold rims on it. I put a Garmin 12-volt power source on it, because this being the street one, this came with a battery, so you can run a Garmin off it, which is pretty cool. Came with headlight, tail light. I put these tucked away little signal lights on it. I replaced the original goofy plastic square headlight with a street variety on there, but it's glass. And the reason I use glass is then you can run a 100-watt high beam and a 55 low H4 halogen bulb in there, and the 100-watt really lights the trails up with the glass. The problem is it runs so hot you have to use a glass headlight, which they don't make anymore. Everything's plastic, so if you put a 100-watt halogen in a plastic housing, it'll probably melt it. So I put this windshield on it, so if you get on the if you get on the logging roads, you know, and you're doing 60, 70K, it helps keep the wind chill off you. It's late in the evening, you're driving back. This is made of Lexan. It's fairly unbreakable. It bends with the, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 millimeter thick Lexan. It bends when you hit the trees, the branches and whatnot. Without breaking. What it doesn't like is solvents and gasoline. It really fractures it, and then it makes it weak, and it will break. This will eventually break. It ages, and so there's a specified time that you're supposed to replace these, say on aircraft, because you use these on aircraft. My understanding is also they use it in prisons. Rather than glass, you use Lexan. So that's that. I put the bush guards on it, so when you drop it, you don't break a lever. I've always used 1040 Castrol GTX. The Castrol GTX works really good. I've had this engine apart a couple times. At one point I put a high comp Wiseco piston in it. I didn't like it. It went a lot better, of course. It added some oomph to it, but you know, it was hard to kick over. This only comes with an electric start, or a kick start. The later ones came with electric start, the XR650L, so they're 50cc more. The later ones, they came with electric start. I don't think they had a kick start, whereas this only has a kick start, which is kind of a drag if you're on the trails all day and you know you're tired and you're on a goat trail and it's turned the wrong way and there's not enough room to kick this thing. It kind of sucks that way. But you know, like here in the shop, it starts fine. There's a little song and dance you go through to start it. You turn the fuel on, let it pour down. You got to put the choke. You got to do the decompression. Kick it down up to TDC, then kick it down a little bit just after TDC, and then you bring the kickstart up and key on, wallop it, and it usually fires up pretty good, even if it's been sitting for a while. But you know, like I said, on a long day on the trail, an electric start's really nice. The later models, the 650s, had a bit more weight to them, and they had less power actually. Oddly enough, this 86 was the most powerful one they made. They had, I think, somewhere around 46 horsepower, and the later ones had something like 39 or something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but they're definitely down on power and heavier too. And what I like about this bike though is that it sits low, so your feet, for trail riding, your feet touch the ground. I like the low end power. It's got a good flywheel in there, and it's got the big bore, so it has a lot of torque in low speed situations. Like if you're on a hill and you have to slow down and avoid the obstacle, and then you have to get on this throttle again, you just whack it and away it goes. And I like the fact that it's an enduro, so it's technically street legal. So if the fish cops, as we call them up here in Canada, pull you over, then there's not much you can do about it because it is registered as a street bike. We're kind of weird up in Canada. You're not allowed driving, by the way, if you don't know, you're not allowed driving ATVs on the roadways here. You're not allowed driving off-road vehicles on the road here. World's second largest country, lack of roads, and but you still got to plate them, by the way. You got to plate them, insure them, and your headlight, tail light for a fully off-road bike in the bush. And if they catch you without insurance, it's a $2,500 fine plus a 15% victim surcharge, they call it. So it comes out to $2,850 for having no insurance on a motorcycle that you can't ride on the street. And they go out by Calgary all the time, McLean Creek, Bragg Creek, and the police hang out and they go fishing for revenue, and they bust people, ruin their long weekend. Nice people. Anyways, getting on with it. I used to use this thing up for the trails in around the Cuss, the Monashee Mountains in British Columbia. You have a lot of hot springs up there. They got a lot of old mining trails, and you can get up to the tops of the mountains on the old trails. And so I truck this thing out and go hot spring hunting and this sort of thing. And great bike for that. So it's a good trail bike. It's made of good solid metal. I put a bit larger foot pegs on. It's got the original gold rims on here, single disc up front, drum brake on the rear, which works good for the most part. I'm not sure, really I'm a big fan of the disc brakes on the rear. I don't think the stopping power is that much different than a well set up drum brake. You know, the thing is, if you're going through a lot of water, you get the water in there and that diminishes your braking capacity. For sure, I get that. But, you know, overall, I think the drum is a far more reliable and robust system than a disc brake. So if you're looking at one of these, they're getting kind of long in the tooth. He did sell them till about, here in Canada, I don't know, till the mid-2000s, something like that. Maybe even later, 2012, I think, for the XR650Ls. But like I said, they're a bit different of bike. They're a bit of a handful. It is a big bike. It is heavy compared to, I don't know, say a 250. But again, I like the oomph of the single cylinder. This is kind of an oddball. It has two carburetors on. It's a single cylinder, but it's got two carburetors and two exhaust pipes, two exhaust ports on the head. And what that is about is, so one carburetor when you're just putting around, and this thing, by the way, is phenomenal on fuel. My God, it's good on fuel. If you got the one carburetor, and if you're just putting around, then it's only on one carburetor. And then when you whack it open, the other carburetor opens. And so the other carburetor is just formatted to high-speed running, so that when you whack it, you get this extra boost of power, which is kind of cool. A few bikes use that configuration. I believe the XR250s used it, and the XR400s back in the day. Maybe I'm wrong on the 400s, but I think the 250s use it. Yamaha XT550s from the same vintage era used the dual carburetors. And then they went away from it, I guess for cost, simplicity, manufacturing reasons. You know, it's quite complicated. If you know, it's when you take it apart, there's a lot of pieces and moving parts. There's little linkages in there. So if you just have a single carburetor, it makes a lot more sense in many ways. But it was a cool design exercise for sure. I put a couple hooks on the back here, and just a bit of an old ratchet strap. I cut up a couple hooks going right through the through the frame holes back on the tail end of it. Put a big sprocket on the rear, and you see where I welded it about an inch, had an extended for hill climbing sort of thing. It's got the little fuel filter on there. It's got the dual carburetors. I don't know if you can see that under there, but it's got twin carburetors, and it's got 2 exhaust pipes coming out of a single cylinder piston. 600cc it is. Single disc on the front. Got a drum on the rear. This had a couple cool features on the rear, little details that you don't find on today's bikes. It had a little hook on the back attached to the swinger. There's a little hook here where you put the axle on when you put the new tire on, and it just sits there so you can position it and just slide it into where it has to go. It has these quick adjust concentric chain adjusters with little numbers on them, and it has a little retainer so that it doesn't slide back off when you're putting the wheel on. It has a little cotter pin on the little drum on the brake, which is kind of cool, so that this doesn't fall out, which it normally does. And then there's no brake bar on it. It has it right on the swing arm, which everything's designed to have it kind of slick, so you can just pop a wheel on and off. Crusty old bike, haven't washed it up. I stripped the tank years ago, polished it, and clear coated it so it doesn't rust. Kind of a little interesting tidbit if you're changing the oil on this thing. The fill plug is right there behind the tank. It's a dry sump system, so there's actually a drain plug on the bottom. You take the skid plate off, and there's a drain plug on the bottom, plus a screen that you have to clean. So you have to drain the oil tank, which is in the frame, as part of the frame member, and then there's a plug on the bottom of the engine as well, which you drain. And then when you fill it up, of course, and the filters here, it's a CH6015 in the Fram world. I'm not sure the Honda number off the top of my head, but CH6015, pop it in. It only goes in one way. You can force it in the other way. Be aware that if you force it in the other way, that's the wrong way, you'll starve your engine of oil. So don't do that. It won't fully starve it of oil, but it'll starve it enough so over probably 15 minutes it'll screw the engine hard, and you'll need an engine rebuilt or another engine. So be aware which side. It actually says this side out on the filter. Most good quality filters will say that. So what you do is you pop in a new filter, drain the oils, put the plugs back in, obviously, and you fill it up, and then you fill it up till it hits the top. And then you screw it in, run it, and the level will go down. It'll suck that oil down to the engine. Then there's always residual oil in the engine, and then you have to fill it up again. And when you go to check the oil on these things, this is very important, it'll seem low. But if it was full before, start it and then check it. Because what happens is there's a check valve in there, and all the oil in the tank goes down into the engine, and it looks like it's empty, but it's not. So when you add another liter or two of oil, it'll pump back out the crankcase all over the floor, which isn't a big deal. You're not getting blowing seals or nothing. It has to go somewhere, though. You can't, stuff excessive amount of oil in there, because it has to go somewhere. So usually it goes on the floor through the crankcase breather, starts blowing up into your air filter. So do check the oil after you've started. If it's been sitting for a long time, that's really important with dry sump systems. That XV1600 I done a video of, that had a dry sump system. Harley's, old CB750Ks. There was a number of bikes that had dry sump systems on them. I guess they do that for just the configuration of manufacturing, to make it more compact. I don't know. It's been done for a long time. Old British bikes. Yeah, so anyways, hope that helps. If you're looking at one of these, good bike, but getting harder to find in good shape. And if they're really good shape, and it's an honest sale, then they're probably $3,000, $4,000, something like that. And the newer ones, I think people are asking too much for the old shit, to be honest with you. It's just getting a bit crazy. Anyways, hopefully that helps you know, give you some insight into these old bikes. Anyways, have a good day.